So I'd love to introduce Wali Khan. The guy does it all. But he is to condense it into a few words though, he's a Chicago-based trauma ICU nurse and motivational speaker. Heard him speak before. And, he offers a lot of really different perspectives from, seeing the COVID-19 crisis in a way that I don't think many of us have. It's very admirable. And also, his other perspectives from his journeys in life. I'm really excited to hear from him. And so, Wali, the floor is yours.
Chad, thank you so much for that warm welcome. Like you said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you guys are. Assalamu alaikum to everyone from Jordan and Palestine and everywhere else where you guys are tuned in from. It's really, really nice to have you guys here and to connect with you. I'm used to speaking in person, and this whole COVID pandemic thing has completely changed the way that we communicate and the way that we interact and whatnot. So this is just as peculiar of a setup for me as it is for you. But we're gonna make the best of it, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys. This is an amazing opportunity for us to connect and learn from each other's life experiences, especially during this past year, which made us a global family, literally. So the topic that I was given to speak on is, where are you in this moment? And exactly 1 year ago, we went into lockdown. Actually, March 19th is when Illinois went into lockdown, and everything was shut, and the quarantine orders were legislated by our governor. And so our life changed, right? Because now we can't do the things that we were used to. And it sounds like I'm talking about some post-apocalyptic event, but this is our reality and our mutual global living experience. And some of us are still under lockdown and still have the restrictions that, we don't really like, but we know they're necessary. And there have been many lessons that have been learned, some unwillingly, unwantedly, and others necessarily. We learn about ourselves, we learn about others, and we learn about the world that we live in. And I'll share 2 stories with you that'll really constitute the majority of my talk. And you can call them perspectives. Let's call them perspective, not stories. One is a civilian, just like you and I, living our day-to-day lives. And one is an individual who was thrown kind of feet, head, hands first into a pandemic, never having been in one, only watched movies on it. And that was it. So about a year ago, I shared a picture on my Instagram. And if you go, they put a handle there, you can go and see it. It's a picture of an elderly man at a grocery store. And he's looking down at his grocery list because, the older generations are not really so keen on smartphones, right? So they can't have people text their groceries to them or order it from Walmart.com or a grocery store. So they have a piece of paper. This guy, he has a piece of paper, and he's looking at his grocery list, and then he looks up and there's nothing left. And this is all encapsulated in one picture. And you can see he's a man with not so great posture. He's old, and he's looking down, and there's literally nothing left in the grocery aisles. And why is that? Because when the pandemic first started, we went into survival of the fittest mode. That's what we did, because we thought that the young and strong, they were so eager to protect themselves. And what we did was we began to stockpile and hoard groceries and other house, necessities like toilet paper and paper towel and bottled water. And we began to prepare for the end of the world. And I said, it seems like I'm talking about a post-apocalyptic time, like a movie, but this was our reality 1 year ago. We were doing that. And we thought it was only affecting old people, right? This COVID thing. But the fact of the matter is, it wasn't. It was affecting everybody: old, young, black, white, Asian, Puerto Rican, Jamaican, Jordanian, Palestinian, like you name it. Everybody was affected by COVID, right? Pakistani, you name it. White, black, everybody. And we were so misinformed and grossly uneducated when we believed this, because we began to restructure our lives in that manner. But what was detrimentally affecting the elderly, the vulnerable, the poor, the immunocompromised, the ones with the exceptionally low income and the disabled, and it wasn't the ones that were sick and the young children and the parents at home. It wasn't COVID, right? It was greed. it was gluttony, it was apathy, it was inhumanity. That's what was affecting our human family more than COVID, because COVID was still developing. We hadn't understand it, right? The death toll hadn't risen yet, but we were doing this to ourselves. And undoubtedly, these were trying times, but they were depriving us, many of us, of our freedoms and our routines. But unfortunately, we allowed it to deprive us of our humanity. And but the beautiful thing that came from this, because I don't want to focus on the negatives, right? But that was one thing that was happening. But what we did to rise to the occasion and come together as a global family was many communities, including my own here in Naperville, right? So our masjid, the Islamic Center of Naperville, was one of the organizations that began this, and churches started following afterwards. We started a volunteer help network delivery service to help the elderly and the needy. And that included families that may have someone with special needs or disability, or parents with young kids, new moms, with grocery and medication pickup. And so we had a hotline set up, and if you needed something, young individuals, right, who were able to drive, like yourself, maybe seniors in high school or young college kids, and I was on that list. And if somebody needed something and we were in a driving range, we had it coordinated really, really well, and we would go and facilitate this for them. So they didn't feel like we left them to die because they had, an elderly parent at home, or they had a newborn, or they had an illness or a disease. We wanted to let them know that they were not forgotten, that they were still part of our family. And so the pandemic allowed us to be exemplary as well. It allowed us to be caring, to be loving, and to be at service to humanity. And you don't have to be a medical personnel to play a key role, even now, because each of us sitting here right now, right, logged in, listening attentively, we have our own important part to play. And then I'll share really quickly, because I know the time is coming to an end, my other role, the other perspective, right? And this was my life as a trauma nurse in a pandemic. Now, as a trauma nurse, for those that are in the US, you may know, it's primarily, a nurse that's dealing with trauma, right? So penetrating and blunt trauma, gunshot wounds, stabs, burns, car accidents, that's what it deals with, right? But when the pandemic hit, I became a nurse of all, literally of all, jack of all trades. We were doing everything in the hospital, medical ICU, people were coming in, undifferentiated diagnosis, and everybody who was anybody and was sick, I was taking care of them. And so it became very exhausting. I mean, seeing so much death every single day, right? Of course, people died from violence and car accidents and houses, burning from fires and whatnot. But in addition to that, people were coming in and dropping like flies, pardon the expression, because we were dealing with something we didn't understand. We had no idea how COVID was spreading, what was happening, how it was going to kill you, what it was doing inside the body, but it was happening. And we had to adapt and react on the go. And so, as you can imagine, seeing human beings die left and right, and they were dying alone, that was the key, because you couldn't have family, right? You couldn't have any visitors. And they were isolated in a room all by themselves. And you know how they died? They primarily died from respiratory issues. Imagine being suffocated to death, but your entire body begins to fail. Your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your liver, your brain, everything dies because it affected everything in the body. And what was so hard was to be a human being with a soul and a heart and to watch these people die. And there was nothing you could do, honestly. You exhausted all medical efforts, right? You took care of them the best that you could. You gave them whatever medication was, being regulated by the CDC and the World Health Organization, but nothing was working because we didn't have a vaccine. We didn't know how this virus was transforming and transmutating inside us. And for me at that moment, right? And as my bio, they said, as a Muslim man's perspective, right? And we can remove the Muslim aspect from it, and just as a human being's perspective, seeing all of this. For me, my faith kept me leveled, right? For me, Islam was the thing that allowed me to navigate through this, because I know that faith is very unique to each individual, right? Our connection with God and what we perceive our relationship with Him to be guides us through difficult moments in our lives, right? Calamities, as we call them, trials and tribulations. So having an unshakable belief that God will see us through this so long as we do our part. And, some people like to downplay religion when it comes to this, like, oh, you think God is going to send you a vaccine? He's going to take the virus away? And that's a foolish way to think at it, right? Because
we had to do our part. We had to social distance. We had to put on masks. We had to work hard in the lab and develop a vaccine through the facilitation that was provided to us by our intellect and our means, right? And then as somebody with a belief that this is how God helps, this is how you have faith, that so long as I do my part, God will take care of things, right? So the facilitation of our means through that. So despite a pandemic, still taking the time to observe Salah, still praying, right? And I'm using some Arabic words in there because I know that I have Arabic speakers, right? Like being punctual. Ramadan is coming up now, but we're still in a pandemic. How does that affect me as a young Muslim man or a young Muslim woman? I still have my obligations of faith that I have to carry out, despite the fact that there are things happening in the world. So the way that I found to center myself was to take the time to pray, take the time to have this communion and this relationship with God, to self-reflect on a daily basis, right? And as Muslims, we do that 5 times a day. We observe prayer 5 times a day. So really spend that time alone, right, in the company of God, to see where you're at in life. What are you doing? How are you living life? How are you treating other people? To be a good person despite worse circumstances your own life may be in or the world may be in. So at this moment now, my role has changed once again, right? I'm back in school full time. I'm a student just like you guys in a doctoral program. And my favorite self-care practices, as they asked me to comment on briefly, was, I still take time out for myself. I still pray. I have to. It's necessary, because sometimes people won't understand you, but God will. And taking the time to exercise and still be active, and slowly but surely, we are returning to a life of normalcy. And we're here right now connected, right? And God willing, next time we'll be together in an auditorium or a room, and it'll be so great to, shake Seth's hand and Randy's hand and see them again, who actually are teachers at my high school that I went to. So it's always a pleasure to be here. And that's, I'll get off my soapbox now. And that's my take. And I'm so glad to be here again. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'm so excited to hear from the speakers.
Thank you very much, Wali. Absolutely awesome. If I could get some reactions from anybody, that was really great to hear, Wali. So we have some time for some questions for you. So we definitely like to ask them. I want to tell everyone here that feel free to message me. Message me any questions that you might have for Wali, and I or Mahi will ask him. I have one already for you as they start coming in here. Wali, how have you transformed your perspective on inviting and helping others to participate in community outreach?
I'm sorry, Chad, can you repeat that question one more time? I got a little static in here.
No worries. So how have you transformed your perspective on inviting or helping others to participate in community outreach, considering that our sense of community and what that means has taken a very different form these days?
I think the way that we've done that is to allow individuals to recognize that everyone is capable of doing something. Everybody doesn't have to do everything, but everyone has to do something. And when you empower people with that belief and you allow them to realize that we all have a capacity to do something, right? It's like, and I'll give you an example, it's like a teacher. And when they're assessing how their class is doing and they're looking at people's grades and how the students turn their assignments in, right? The level of care and the level of reform in the work that the teacher shows to each student is going to be different based upon what their capabilities and capacities are. And when we're in communities and we see that there's a need, but there are people that are good at that thing, right? So you capitalize on that. You find the people that are the helpers, that are the movers. There are some people that are more keen to doing things with their hands, right? They're more action oriented. And then there's people like here on this amazing platform that organize a global summit and bring people from all across the world because they're really good at it. They're tech savvy. So helping people to realize what their potential is and then really guiding them towards that direction so they too feel that they can be great, right? And that's what a leader does in whatever capacity that you lead in, right? It doesn't have to be just a teacher. You can be a leader in your own household, in your home, with your parents, with your siblings. You can be a leader in your school, in your classroom, in your place of worship, in your place of employment. So it really just depends where you are, looking at the role that individuals can fill and serve, and guiding them appropriately and gently with love and compassion so they feel empowered. It's about empowering people to fill those roles.
Thank you. I think talking about tapping into that potential is so important in a time like this. Another question that just came in is, what do you hope that the global health community takes away from this pandemic?
That's a great question, right? I have to be a realist and an idealist and comment on both of that. I really hope that we can see that we don't have to abandon one another just because times are tough. You have a lot of Jordanians here, right? And if I may comment, my wife works for a nonprofit organization called Helping Hand. And she took a trip to Jordan last year, and they were on the border. And you know what happens on the Jordanian border? It's filled with refugees from Syria, from Palestine, even Jordan. And you know why they're there? Because Jordan is one of those countries that actually takes people in and lets them come. Refugees, people that don't have a home, people whose homes and lives were bombed to disintegrated. They were sleeping one day and the next day they don't have a home, they don't have a family, they don't have any income, no capital, nothing. But now they got to go to somebody else's doorstep and say, hey, can I live in a tent in your backyard here on the border? It's really cold and I'll use the hole in the ground as a bathroom and I'll put a curtain so my wife has some privacy, but do you mind if I stay here? Like, I really hope that not just the pandemic, that we're able to look around our respective worlds, because Naperville is my world, right? I'm not in Amman. I'm not in Kenya. I'm in America. So wherever we are, I hope we can look around in our world and see that these human beings are still an extension of me. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Every single person that's tuned in right now, has blood flowing through their veins, has a heart beating in their chest, and they're breathing oxygen. God forbid if something happened to any of you, if our blood was matching, I could save your life. The same blood that runs through me runs through you, and I can save your life. If something happened to you and you needed a transplant of a kidney or a part of my liver, I could give that to you to save your life. But why does that have to be only during times when it's life and death? Why does it have to be when the worst thing is about to happen, then our humanity comes and wakes us up? When every single day people are in need, people need a place to stay, a food, a meal to eat, shoes to wear. And we all have the capacity to do that. I hope what we can take away as a global family is there's always going to be people that need help, that need compassion and love and mercy. And it shouldn't take us being pressed against the wall with a global pandemic to say, oh my God, I'm a human being. I'm allowed to feel compassion and humanity. Should I help other people? Like, it shouldn't take that. So really reflect on yourself. What kind of a person am I? I like to help people. I'm selfish. I shouldn't do that, right? Like, do a self-inventory. That would be my message to my global family.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Wali. I believe that's all. We're going to have time for questions. Wali, thank you once again. It's always great to hear you speak.